Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming out here this afternoon. I'm really excited that we're going to have a chance to talk to Chuck here from the Manitoba Chamber. Things that we've been trying to do here at the Brandon Chamber is making sure we're keeping people up to date and informed. But part of the way that we're able to do that, of course, is by accessing our Manitoba Chamber network. So Chuck has been instrumental for us in terms of being able to get you the information that you need and helping us to advocate for the things that are important to our community, important to you as a business owner, and helping to make sure that we get through this all together. So with that, I'd like to welcome Chuck and tell you how much we totally appreciate you coming and spending a little bit of time with us today.
Cathy, thank you very much, and thanks for the invitation from the Brandon Chamber to take part in this. And this is something that we've been doing quite regularly for the last probably month with local chambers, and it's really twofold. One, to give you a broader understanding of some of the things that we're working on at the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce. Of course, trying to be, provide information and programs to the chamber network throughout Manitoba, knowing that there are 71 different chambers. I think that's important. But more importantly, as well, is to get information from you in terms of what are some of the things that you're dealing with in your communities as a chamber, as business owners, in relation to COVID-19. And I think really that's where, I always talk about the power of the network, which has really been exemplified over these last number of weeks as we're trying to deal with these real challenges that are going on. So there's real two focuses that from our organization that we're looking at right now. When this all came down in early March, and we started preparing to a certain extent, not knowing what this was going to look like. And some of the things that we've started to do specifically on our website is really be a repository for information. One, we started very much so in terms of giving a better understanding of what some of those things that people needed to do on a day-to-day basis. And this was things like washing your hands. This was the social distancing. These were some of the initial things, how to deal with being at home and working from home. Trying to provide some resources for the average business person as well. One of the things that was done early on, and Carolyn Jansen from my office was instrumental in developing a pandemic protocol for a lot of small businesses going through times like this. This is unprecedented, and not having those plans in place in terms of what sort of measurements you need to be taking, how you need to continue to operate was helping them through that. And so it's documents like that have been really instrumental that we've been sharing with the Chamber Network to share with your members to help those small businesses along as they're going through this. So that was been critical for us. So in addition, some of the things that we've been doing, we've obviously increased the amount of communication that you're going to see coming from our office. Early on, we were putting out information almost every second day. Full e-newsletters. This is typically something we would do once a week. We increased that significantly because we knew there was going to be such a demand for information from the chamber network. And what we've been able to do is share that information with all of the local chambers to share with their membership as well. And what we've seen is obviously a significant increase in that communication with local chambers and with their memberships as well. So we think that's absolutely a critical element of this. I think the other thing that's really come through as a result of this is exactly this. The number of video conferences I think that people are on a daily basis has risen significantly. I think if you would have had shares in Zoom, you're probably a millionaire today as a result of this. But I think what it's also done is it's really provided a opportunity to expand the network. And so as a result, one of the things that we've been doing as well since day one is twice a week, we have all of the chambers from around the province on a call to, again, provide them with updates of some of the things that we're working on at the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce, getting input from them in terms of what they're hearing in their communities, and using it as a bit of an advocacy tool as well to be able to share some of that information. So what we're seeing is a significant increase in information going out through the chamber network, through websites, through social media, through videos, and other toolkits have been provided. Another toolkit that we've just recently been working on as well is looking at all the programs. And I think that's the reality that we find from a small business perspective is the number of programs that are coming out from both the federal and provincial government is staggering. They're changing on a daily basis. There's new announcements coming out virtually every day as well on a variety of different topics, a variety of different sectors, and trying to keep the business community as apprised as possible about some of those programs, and whether or not they're going to be available to them is something that we're trying to do a good job of as well. So Carolyn from my office has also been putting together sort of that overview of the programs that you can find on our website. So what I always encourage is go to our website. We've got a very simple handle for it, jointhechamber.ca. If you go to that link, we'll have all that information on our website. We encourage the chambers to go there. We encourage business members to go there, take that information and use it for your own if need be. The second real role that we really play is on advocacy. And this is something that we do on a regular basis. So, and that's why it's important to be on these calls and to hear what some of the concerns from business are as a result of what's been happening over the past month as well. What we're finding in Manitoba is that the chamber network is extremely valuable to government decision makers. And so we've had regular conversations on almost a weekly basis with the Premier, with the Finance Minister, with the Minister for Economic Development and Training. We've had calls with the Healthcare Minister. We've had calls with federal ministers as well on a regular basis, because what they're really looking for when you're developing programs is wanting a good understanding of how this is going to impact the business community. And if you don't have these discussions in terms of, is this program going to fit? Or more importantly, is this program not going to fit? And so we've been able to take that feedback that we're hearing from our members and to convey that to the variety of politicians that we're meeting with on a regular basis to say, you know what, you need to tweak this program. Here's why it doesn't work, and here's what you can do. And a perfect example of how this one can work is specifically in regards to the wage subsidy program that the federal government put in place. When the program was initially established about a month ago, it was only looking at a 10% wage subsidy. What we clearly found when discussing this with business, and this was at a very early time in the pandemic, when most businesses had been were being told that they were going to have to close, this was not going to sustain them at all. And it made no sense for business to continue to be open or to continue to not have to lay off its employees when it had zero revenues coming in if the wage subsidy was only going to be for 10%. They've increased that to 75%. Since that time, they've made adjustments in regards to the amount of payroll you can have. It's now 20,000 to 1.5 million. At one point, it was 50,000 to a million. So again, this has all been as a result of the feedback that we're getting from actual businesses, and taking that information and having those conversations with either Parent Beatty at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce or with officials at that we've had discussions with at both provincial and federal level. So that's how these policies do have the ability to be changed. So we're continuing to make sure that we're listening to business to make sure that these programs are going to fit what their needs are. So just to kind of give a sort of example of some of the programs that are available right now for businesses. Obviously, the wage subsidy program is the big one, which is the 75% wage subsidy program. That will be open to the public starting on Monday in terms of being starting for applications. As well, the CEBA program, which is the emergency benefit one, is the $40,000 loan program. That one is available now. You do that one through your banks or your credit unions. It's a simple process to go through. It's a $40,000 loan that you can use for whatever you want. If it's paid back by the end of 2022, $10,000 of that grant is forgivable. Other programs that are available, the business credit availability program is one through BDC and EDC. There's also a new one coming for commercial rent assistance that's being worked on by the federal government as well, that will help for the rents that are going to be paid by which we know are challenging for businesses. We're seeing things like tax deferrals have been coming forward as well. That's been happening. We're also seeing increased funding through WD. So there's a whole litany of programs that are being established right now that are available for businesses. And what we're trying to make it through our website and through the discussions that we have is how do we make this easy for business to be able to navigate through all those programs. From a provincial standpoint, you would have heard yesterday the Manitoba Gap Protection Plan, which is $6,000 from the province. That was made available yesterday. Looking at all of the details in regards to that, there are deferrals as well on things like hydro and MPI rates, tax deferrals, income tax, corporate income tax. Again, a number of programs are in place to help business. We've also, in Manitoba specifically, the province of Manitoba has engaged with 24/7. So there will be a call center to be able to take calls from businesses and share that information. They will also be being proactive with that. What we've encouraged the province, and here's again where the advocacy comes in, is share that information with us at the Manitoba Chamber. We'll share it with the chambers, who are in a much better position to be able to provide that information to your members rather than having to go through a call center. So we're really adamant about that we would much rather have that information and be able to do that work on our own. So those are some of the programs that exist right now. There are more on the way, as always. The big talk right now is recovery. You would have seen earlier today, the province of Saskatchewan outlined their 5-stage recovery plan, which will start taking effect next week in regards to things like campgrounds, allowing them to open, and retail a little bit later in May. We're having those discussions here in Manitoba as well, providing guidance as to what a recovery looks like. We do know that it is going to be staged. It's going to be done in a very meticulous approach, but it's one that is important. My commentary up until we get to that point is that, I understand the notion of talking recovery, but my commentary has always been that we need to stabilize business first. And until business feels stable and has a sense that it has money in its pocket, or the programs that they're applying on fit and they have the ability to receive funding for, it's tough for a business to talk recovery. So that's something that we know is coming, and we'll be in front of that as well. So some of the other things that we've done, I sort of go back, is that we did do a business survey that we appreciate the Brandon Chamber and many other chambers circulating to your membership early on, just to get a sense as to how badly impacted businesses were. We will be doing another one in conjunction with Leger Marketing. We're looking at doing another survey discussion more on recovery. We're in the process of putting that together right now. We'll be looking to get that out in the next, I would suggest, next 10 days to 2 weeks again, to be able to really gauge the feedback from the business community and to be able to advocate on their behalf as a result of that. So with that, maybe I will stop talking, and I've shared enough information. And if you want me to take questions, or where you want to go from there.
Okay, well, that's great. Just because Carolyn's helping to make sure that you've got all your information. She's filling in your holes for you. A couple of things that Carolyn from the Manitoba Chamber has identified is that there is a Canadian wage subsidy calculator, and I believe that actually was on her most recent email out to everyone. So she's, you guys continue to provide great service in terms of getting us that information. And the other thing is that there's now a dedicated line for business regarding the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy. It's just opened up, and again, that number is available as well. So certainly, great opportunity for people to access those programs. Now, one of the things that we wanted to do today is make sure that we also had the chance to get a little bit of information. So we put together some poll questions, and maybe we'll kick off that very first poll question. So our behind the scenes guy, Jeff, he's got one here. This one's actually a two-parter, and you'll have to scroll down a little bit. But the first thing we'd like to know is, which of the following financial and support programs have you already or plan to access? And if in this case, you can click off more than one. So if there's any programs that you have already accessed, if you could just let us know, all of our participants, let us know which ones you've accessed. And the second half of that question is, do you believe the combination of those programs will meet your needs on a scale of 1 to 5? So we're going to give you about 30 seconds or so to get your answers in on that. And then we'll let you see what the response back is. Now, in the meantime, Chuck, you talked a little bit about, making sure that we stabilize business. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, how stable, as far as the programs that have come out so far, how well are we doing in terms of getting business in Manitoba stabilized?
Well, I think we've still got a ways to go. I mean, the reality with the programs that we've indicated here, the only one that's really open is the CRB program. And so that being the $40,000 grant program, which run through the banks and credit unions is quite easy to access and to actually get dollars from. Obviously, the wage subsidy program is the big one for a lot of businesses, not open yet. The 10% wage subsidy, some businesses have been able to access, but a lot of the other programs, the BDC and the EDC program, are not open yet. So that's the real challenge for a lot of businesses, is that, and this is the understanding as well, is that typically programs like this, government doesn't, sort of flip overnight. And that's the real challenge that I sometimes have, is that government never moves at the speed of business. And in terms of emergency, you really need them to move a lot quicker. So, my commentary to the government has always been, don't worry about getting these programs perfect. We just need them good right now. And if we're going to spend all of our time trying to make sure that, everything is kind of looked after, we're going to not get these programs out, and it's going to continue to hurt business on a daily basis when they're really looking for those additional revenues so they can stabilize. So we're not there yet at all, as far as I'm concerned. And so there's a lot more work that needs to be done, and the government needs to move a lot quicker on some of these programs.
Okay. Jeff, maybe we'll just ask you, is how we're doing on the polling? Has everybody had their chance to get your answers in?
Actually, I just sent a note over to get people filling it out. You've only got 3 of 13 that have voted.
Okay, guys, this is where you get a chance to give us some feedback. Let us know what you're already thinking about accessing. We've got the whole list of programs there. And to give a little bit of feedback on whether you plan to access those. One of the things that I know the government has done to try to really encourage Manitoba business is to make sure they put in that 24/7 touch program, or in touch program. Do you think that, how do what's some of the barriers in terms of getting business to actually access that?
Well, I think, again, it's the amount of information, the number of programs that are out there. I mean, the intent that the Premier had when he approached us with this idea was wanting to make sure that of these programs that the federal government has put in place, that there are billions of dollars on the table. And they're ones that will obviously have a significant impact on the, on businesses surviving through this, and wanting to make sure that we were taking full advantage of the programs. And so sort of the concept that they've kind of put together is that, an organization like the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce is as awesome as we are. There's only 7 or 8 of us in the office, so we don't have the ability to contact every business in Manitoba and provide them with the information or to take those calls. And so the whole concept of having 24/7 is it really increases the number of people that have the ability to take questions, to be proactive in contacting businesses. The challenge is always that, so many of these programs are changing on a daily basis and are so complicated that it's difficult, in my mind, to be able to get people up to speed on these programs as quickly as possible. I mean, we've been dealing with this for 6 weeks, and there are still elements to some of these programs that you're getting questions to be able to answer your members as to whether or not they applied, because there can be very detailed questions that people have. And so it's a good concept, having being proactive in that approach. It'll really be telling to see how many businesses start accessing it, which is why, from a chamber perspective, we've rather said, share that communication material with us. I'd much rather the Brandon Chamber of Commerce have that information to share with your members directly, because you've already got that relationship and they would be used to calling you for these kind of things. I think that's going to be more important and a better relationship than Carolyn and Alex telling those members that they need to call a call center and not being able to potentially get the answers they're looking for. So that's kind of the approach that we think it's a good approach, but we much rather have it done in conjunction with the various economic development agencies as well as the chambers of commerce in the province.
Okay, so with that, we actually have our polling results. And so we can see that, and these will be available, of course, after. We can see that there's kind of a wide spread. And as far as information goes, I can't get down to the next one. Oh, it says for the most part, people in general are feeling okay with what we've got. So like they're obviously there's some level of confidence, which is certainly good. Um, as far as when we start talking about recovery, because I think that's somewhat of what we're starting to move towards. You talked a little bit about the stability of businesses and making sure those businesses are stable. As we see those programs roll out in the next couple of weeks and be able to actually access them, do you believe that that will be enough to stabilize those businesses so that we can actually really start moving into that recovery?
Yeah, I do. I do think it will be, because I think that's important, that they need to know that they have the supports in place, and that they do need a bit of a time frame on what recovery looks like, and knowing. And this is really going to impact those businesses that have been instructed to close their doors and that have been closed for over the last month, giving them a better time frame as to when things are going to reopen and what things are going to look like. Because the reality is as well that things, and as much as we want to think that it on a specific date things are just going to open up to the way they were, that's not going to be the case whatsoever. And there will be certain measures that are going to have to be taken in place, specifically from a retail or from a hospitality perspective, to be able to be reopened. I mean, I think you're seeing it in specifically the grocery stores and the pharmacies now, in terms of some of the precautionary measures that they are taking, because it's extremely important that when we get through this, that we provide a workplace where employees feel safe coming to work, employers feel safe bringing employees to work, and even more importantly, that consumers feel safe going into your establishments. Because if you don't have that sense that this is really not going to move forward in the manner that we want. So, part of what we've recommended all along is that, what needs to happen is, and this is being done on a variety of different sectors, is that you almost need the public health officers need to outline, here's some of the measures that you need to take to be able to operate in a safe manner, in one that continues to look after the importance of social distancing, whether it's you need staff to have masks in place, and a variety of different things, so that you've got that so you can reopen. And it's going to need to be done slowly as well. For instance, I've looked earlier today at what Saskatchewan is doing. Hospitality is going to most likely be one of the last sectors to be brought back, in restaurants and bars. And even when it does, it's most likely going to be at 50% capacity, that you can't open it up to a great extent, because they're still looking in terms of, size of gatherings. Those are going to obviously ratchet up, but it's going to be done in a very slow format, I would suggest. And there's going to be certain metrics that, public health officials are going to be looking at before they determine how much further they're willing to go.
Okay. So when we talk about stabilize, not to put any words in your mouth, but basically, from what I'm getting from that is, step one to getting to recovering from this is to stabilize our businesses financially. Step two being to start putting in place those safety protocols and making sure we understand how to, bring back our employees and our customers and ourselves. What do you see, not to put you, I'm going to put you on the hook.
Go
What
ahead.
see as being, the next phase of this is, as we kind of go through this recovery, is there that next phase that we need to be looking at?
Yeah, I think that next phase on recovery is most likely going to come next week. I think the premier has already hinted that they're going to outline what their what their plans look like. There has been some discussion on that. We've been involved in terms of what are some of those key sectors that are open and which ones are not. Because what's also going to have to happen after you do recovery is that, and it's going to be critical for government to make some key investments in regards to how do we move forward through this. And so there's a whole raft of different ideas as to what that looks like. From my perspective, the investments that are going to need to be made have to do with workforce. I think the challenge that a lot of businesses are going through right now and have been is that if you've been in a situation where you've had to lay off employees, those employees may be employed somewhere else by now. And so it's not as simple as just bringing them back. And so that's going to be absolutely critical, is that we set aside dollars for training or retraining of staff. I think organizations as well are going to have to look in terms of what their business model is. I think the business model that they may have had 3 months ago is going to be changed dramatically moving forward. I think more and more businesses are, sort of looking at ensuring they have an online presence. the importance of technology on their business as well. I think this has really moved things forward in and disrupted that in a manner that we weren't expecting to be at this speed, but it's happening quickly. And the more businesses have the ability to adapt to that, I think the more successful they're going to be coming out of this. So that's my key in terms of what recovery is going to look like. I think obviously, one, getting some dollars in the pockets, two, having a clear outline of what recovery looks like. And then from a business standpoint, it's not enough to be open. It's how are you going to make those maneuvers within your business to make sure that it's going to be able to run over the long term as well, because I think that's going to be extremely important, whether it's from a workforce perspective, a technology perspective, or it's just a different business model as well.
Okay. So we'll just say we've got phase one being stabilized, phase two getting those health and safety protocols, and then it's going to be really about that investment. So, from your perspective, how are we doing in each one of those phases at this point in terms of working with the government?
Yeah, I think we're doing well. I think in phase one, many will be critical, specifically of the province, and may have said what they were kind of late to the game with the funding that they announced yesterday. I've always looked at it from the perspective of, the federal government is in the best place in terms of dealing with those key, bigger picture economic issues. The province obviously needs to come to the table, and I think it did yesterday. A $6,000 potentially forgivable grant is not significant, is not going to keep large businesses open. It can be considered symbolic, but it's really going to be there as an assistance for a lot of those small businesses. So I think getting that in place. I think second is listening to the public health officials on recovery. So the government's been pretty open about that and has had some discussions with us through the business community in terms of our thoughts on what recovery looks like. The third point is going to be on the investments. And I think that's where I think the government is still, at all levels, has put in place a number of programs and investments, specifically at the federal level. And I think that's going to be critical as to, what that looks like as well. So I think there's more work to be done there. I think we're heading in the right direction. Obviously, when you see the healthcare numbers and the number of incidents of COVID-19 in Manitoba continue to drop for the most part, or that gap between those that have it and those that are considered recovered, I think is continuing to increase. So I think more and more people are feeling confident. I think obviously we're going to have to take the same measures in terms of that it isn't going to be back to normal, and this is going to be a slow process. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge, specifically this summer, because people are going to want to get out and get back to normal as quick as possible. And that's just not the reality right now. And so that's going to be the struggle for a lot of people is that diligence that they're going to have in regards to this recovery.
Okay. I'm going to open it up to if any of you have any questions.
Cathy, we have one.
Okay.
Do you know if MPI's $110 million rebate is going to include commercial vehicles?
I do not know that. In fact, I didn't see that in the announcement, but we can look into that though. I assume that's Spencer.
That was Spencer.
Got it.
Spot on.
Jack knows Spencer well.
How did you know that was me?
I just knew. But that's a good point. I would assume it would, based on the amount that they're providing. And if it's, that would be good PR for them to do it in that regard. So let me check on that one, Spencer, just to make sure.
Sounds good. Thanks, buddy.
If there's any other questions, as I mentioned, there's a Q&A button right down at the bottom. If you've got any questions as we go through this for Chuck, by all means, please go ahead and either put them in there or put up your hand or whatever you'd like, and we'll make sure that we get those questions to Chuck.
I mean, other things as well, Cathy, even if there's examples that you're hearing from your local businesses that can be shared, I think that's just as important. I know I shared one of the examples from one of the businesses that you have in your community that sent a note. I believe it was a woman that runs a bra store, just in regards to some questions that she had in regards to being able to meet the needs of her customers. So it's stories like that when we share those stories and give examples of the impact that this has, that I think, really put a face and a business name to the challenges the businesses are dealing with. So, anytime people want to, flip me an email or, give me a quick call or even a text and let me know kind of what's going on in the business community. And even the success stories of businesses that are doing things above and beyond. We like to be able to share those stories as well.
One of the things that I wanted to make comment or make sure I made comment today, because I'm not sure how much people are aware of it, is I know that in two cases, specifically one on the 10% wage subsidy, which you talked about, that one coming in early on, how much feedback we had received, and then was able to actually transfer that up to you guys relatively quickly to be able to say this was not going to be a program that was going to work. And the other one being the one that was announced yesterday, in the fact that, we had so many micro businesses in this area, and I'm sure all over Manitoba, that really fell through the gaps. And it was impressive to be able to see how fast you were able to get that information to the appropriate people to help make sure that we could fill that gap as quickly as possible. So I do appreciate certainly what you guys are doing, and the power of the network, I guess we'll say.
Absolutely.
We have another one here, Kath.
Sure.
And this is directed at Chuck. From an advertising perspective, we've heard that some businesses are almost afraid to promote that they're open because they've been publicly shaming through media, social media. Any advice that you would give to or have for retailers as as they're starting to open?
Yeah, and this is something that I think is important as well. And part of what as those businesses are open, we do need to talk about some of the successes that are out there, and some of the businesses that are taking these precautions, are continuing to work when many think that they may need to be shut, but have been deemed to be an essential business. So I'm not a big fan of public shaming whatsoever. I think a lot of these businesses are going above and beyond to meet the needs of their customers. I think that's important, and instead we need to be focusing on sharing some of the things that some of these businesses are doing. Specifically when you talk grocery stores and others that are open, and they've looked at significant costs to be able to make sure that its consumers and its employees are safe coming to work on a daily basis. I think that's important. The other thing that's going to be just as important, and we've suggested this as well, is that there's going to need to be a full public campaign when we do reopen, and that's going to need to come from government is going to have to play a role, and you're seeing it in your on TV and in your local newspapers as well, from a number of companies that are being proactive as well, in this regard. So I think that's important. I see the note now about Canadian Tire. So I think a number of businesses are doing a tremendous job of going above and beyond and doing whatever they can to give consumers that confidence that when they come into their establishment, they're going to have a positive situation. And that's really what's going to have to happen for those businesses that are going to be next to open. They're going to have to follow those same guidelines and those same rules. It's going to be an additional work, but I think it's extremely important to get that consumer confidence back. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that we already are learning a lot from some of those businesses and some of the practices they've done that will help this next wave of people come through. Maybe with that, we have a poll that we'd like to send out to everyone about recovery. So maybe, Jeff, if you don't mind, maybe we can throw that one up. We have two questions. What changes have you made to and in your business? And again, this one is a multiple choice, so all that apply. And when you think about the second half of that question is, when you think about a majority of those changes, do you think they will keep them in place after the recovery? And this is our business model changes. And then do you believe they have a benefit to your business in the long term? So again, if you wouldn't mind, in that first question is, what changes have you made? Have you applied some new technology, or you put in some new equipment? And then, what do you think about those? Do you think they'll keep them after? And have they been a benefit to your business? So we'll just get everyone to answer that one. Chuck, one of the things that I've been really amazed at is how many interesting changes that we've actually seen in some business models. Maybe you could share a couple of your favorite, because I know you get to hear about business all over the province.
Well, it's companies like, Farmery changing their model from doing beer making to doing, providing a sanitizer, and it's a number of businesses like that are being proactive and not necessarily saying, well, I guess we should shut down because our, what we make is not going to be in need, and are looking to make that pivot. Though I'm sure there'll be a time when they pivot back once we get out of this situation. But I think that's, what you love to see is businesses, prepared and willing to make that pivot. And then at the same time, the easy thing for the business community, and I think everyone is sort of on board with this, and this might be the bigger thing, is they're putting the health of Manitobans before they're putting their business. And that can be a challenge for someone. And we recognize that as an organization as well, as that, the important thing for, us right now is to be there as a resource and to recognize that, we're kind of all in this together. And the focus right now does need to be on the public health and getting Manitobans, a greater sense of comfort as we're dealing with this, and worrying a little bit less about the economy. But there is going to be a time where we do need to make that pivot as an organization as well and say, well, we still need to get people back to work as well. So, that I think that's what's, I like to see the most is businesses that are willing to help, that are doing things above and beyond, and really trying to make a difference as a part of this.
I think, I think that there's probably some applications or we've been pushed out of a few boxes, I think, of late that may, in fact, I believe, strengthen our business community in the whole.
Yeah. I look at this as well in terms of, I don't think, the one, as difficult as this has been for the chamber, I don't think I've ever seen the chamber network as engaged and connected as I have through this. And, that's what's most important that we're seeing, is that when we do these weekly calls and bi-weekly calls with chambers, we get 25 to 30 chambers. I get people that I may have not had the ability to see in the past year on a regular basis, and they're making sure that they're doing things. And even when I'm seeing what some of the chambers are really putting out some terrific content to their membership, I think that, that just shows me the strength of the local chambers that we have here in Manitoba, whether it's, a Reshow or a Springfield, or what Brandon is doing and what Dauphin is doing. All these chambers are doing unique things that I think are helping to bring their members together. And again, really speak to the relevance of the chamber network when it comes to situations like this, and why it's important to be a member is exactly for situations like this.
Just in terms of that poll, interestingly enough, we didn't have anyone who said they had done no changes. Everybody's done some sort of change in their business model, and it's quite a wide range. And interestingly enough, we've all agreed that we think they were good changes, and that we do intend that they will have a benefit to our businesses in the long term. So I always like to say that, sometimes lemons are really good to make lemonade. So that's awesome. So when you look at, what steps would you be recommending to our businesses to be thinking about today in terms of going forward as we continue to muddle through this? Is what things do we need to be looking at in our businesses to make sure that they're strong coming out of this?
I think it's being prepared. And I think that's something that a lot of businesses necessarily hadn't had in place, whether it's pandemic planning guides and being prepared for these kind of situations in the past, having things in place like, work from home options and those kind of things. I think a lot of businesses, this may be the norm for some. I think a lot of businesses, people, there'll be a lot less travel. There'll be a lot more video conferences. So I think, what I always encourage is for every business and every organization to look at what they do now, and don't assume that that's going to be what it looks like in 6 months. And even from a chamber perspective, I mean, we were having these discussions internally, when's the next time we're going to be able to host a chamber event? I don't know. And so is that, so what other models are we going to have to look at in terms of engagement with our membership? And even from a revenue standpoint. And so these are different things that I think as organizations and as businesses is having a better understanding as a result of this, what is that going to mean for the way that we've done business in the past? And doing that homework and having a better understanding as to, making sure that, I guess until we, whether it's, have gotten through this pandemic or, can be assured that this isn't going to happen again. There's, it's being prepared for these things. I think that's what's extremely important, is that businesses look at it from that perspective, is that, whether it's the shift to technology, which is, a lot of businesses were planning to do, but have now done in 6 weeks, what they may have been planning to do in, 6 years, I think is important for them to take those things into consideration.
Okay. I'll just remind anyone, if anyone has any questions, by all means, just get them up there and we can ask Chuck. So when you talk about the changes in the chamber, I know that we've been certainly having the same conversation, because our models are generally reliant on events, and we certainly have other revenue. But when you think about the chamber and some of the work that we've been able to do here in the last couple of weeks, do you see a new role for chambers coming up in the future? And let me.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this is something that I think the chamber has really been viewed as that kind of go-to organization when situations like this happen in a community, and specifically with the business community is who do I go to? Who's going to be able to give me the best information on this program, or how I apply for it? So I think that's the reality, is that the chamber is really looked at as that go-to organization from a business standpoint. And then even more so that the importance of advocacy in these perspectives is the ability to have that connection with decision makers is extremely important. And I think those are the kind of things that you really want business owners to understand why chambers exist. And that if you were to go through this situation and there wasn't a chamber of commerce, and every business was on their own and didn't have a resource to go to, or didn't have a network where they could talk to other business members to discuss issues and discuss possible solutions, that this would be a very difficult situation. And so that really, in my mind, sort of underlines the importance of what we're doing. Events are obviously, from a revenue standpoint, have been an important part of chambers. I think what chambers are going to have to learn to do is to look at what are potential other revenue sources as a result of this. So, those are the difficult decisions kind of coming forward. Whether it's just on information, it's how you communicate and how you can monetize different things is going to be important. My hope is that there will come a time when events will obviously be another key component of what chambers do. But I think more and more of our members are looking for information, are looking for the ability to do it in vehicles like this, where they can simply get that information via a webinar, is important as well, though.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that, if we take a look at over this whole thing, I think the strength of and the representation of the chamber network obviously has been of value to our government. You can see that through pretty much every conversation we have, and the amount of things that we've all been invited to, that obviously we're a very important voice, not just in Manitoba, but across Canada.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. One of the questions here is how many businesses actually have a pandemic plan? And my guess would be very few businesses. People are reacting based on available information.
Well, when we did the survey on this question, what we found is if you're a company with less than 50 employees, there was close to 60% of those businesses did not have a pandemic plan. If you're a larger company, most larger companies, which would have over 50 to 100 employees, it was about 90% did have these kind of plans in place. And again, it goes to size of business. If you're a smaller company where or an owner operator that you're doing HR and you're doing everything under the sun, you don't have someone specific to deal with these kind of things. So larger companies are better positioned as a result of this than smaller ones are. And so that's part of why, we're looking at, providing toolkits and those kind of informations that are just the basics for companies to start looking at, recognizing that a lot of those SMEs don't have those resources. They don't have HR people. They may not have a full-time accountant or legal or things like that they can get access to whenever they need. And so those are some of the, a variety of different programs that we're looking at as an organization that, here's some gaps that we're finding exist for SMEs that maybe that we need to help provide for them, and having a pandemic plan so that, when businesses go through this is exactly a reason why.
I know one of the things, maybe just moving a little bit away from the pandemic, but I know one of the things that you've been a really strong advocate for throughout Manitoba is helping us, figure out how we meet this economic development challenge and looking at opportunities for economic development here in the province. From your perspective, we've seen shifts of manufacturing and different kinds of things happening in our province to bring stuff more local. Do you think there'll be more opportunities as we kind of unroll this, that we may actually be able to shift even some of the image of what Manitoba is and what some of the products that we can provide out to the rest of the world?
Yeah, I really think what's going to happen as a result of this is you're going to see supply chains are going to change. I think that notion that, and the way supply chains work now, and they can be very global. You can be getting, 75% of everything that we receive here in Manitoba right now typically comes from the US, but we've got, supply chains with China and various other countries. I really see more and more businesses as a result of this are going to want to do things locally. And they're going to want to have a better relationship with that supply chain. So, I think there's an opportunity with as diversified of as an economy we have in Manitoba, that there will be businesses that look at those opportunities, or even some of those larger companies will be looking to source things more locally, just because they'll have that closer relationship. Should something like this happen again, and there's challenges with getting things from across borders, this will help on those things. So I really think what this is going to do to a certain extent is really expand local economic development and the opportunities in rural Manitoba, I would suggest, to make aware some of the companies that exist here, which is going to be important. So, my sense is that might be a short-term thing, but I really think it's going to open up some doors.
That's great.
Yeah, we have one more question here.
Okay.
The question, I'd heard someone frame this event in the following question: are we in a blizzard, a winter, or an ice age? The feeling is that we may have come through a blizzard, but are we looking at this being a winter with the hope of spring around the corner? Or are we going to need to prepare for an ice age that may last longer? In other words, can you tell us when this will end with your crystal ball there, Chuck?
I wish I had a crystal ball on this one. This is such a difficult one, and I would leave this to public health officials. Obviously, I think everyone is looking for, once they can either find the drug or whatever to solve this, does that when it ends? So my hope is that this is, we're through the worst of this, but I doubt it. I think there's a lot of people that are trying to make this as painless as possible, but this is a real tough one to read, specifically the impact that it's going to have on not only business but on society as a whole.
Which I think leads us really well into our next question for everyone. We have one final poll question, and we'll get our great assistant. There he is. So two-sided question on this one. From your perspective, how will you measure recovery? And we have a bunch of different examples of how you will know that we've recovered. And from your perspective, how long do you anticipate it will take? We have a couple more things from, there's a question directly for you, Chuck. Chuck, have you
No,
any paintings on the
I've got this fancy thing behind me now, Hood. That was just because Jeff made fun of me when he sees me on TV and I've got nothing on the walls in my living room.
Well, I saw you on a webinar the other day and you had this really nice thing in behind you. So
oh yeah, for sure.
Looks great.
If Jeff would send me like a family photo or something, I'd put his family up on my wall.
Oh, there you go. Carolyn actually provides a couple different other things that there's a quick link to a COVID pandemic response toolkit. So if you don't have that, it's actually a great one on Manitoba Chamber. I've already checked that one out. It's fantastic. So if you haven't got that one, we've also developed a business continuity toolkit. And I think those are important to mention, because while this is a pandemic issue, if you haven't got those kind of continuity plans in place, you might want to do that. Here in Brandon, a couple years ago, we had some devastating fires, and that, could be the same thing for your business. So if you haven't got one, please check those out. Is there any other questions that people might have? Oh, I thought we had one. No, maybe not.
Kath, there's another question here. We have heard various opinions that some businesses may not survive the crisis. Do you have any idea on provincial level what the bankruptcy rate or business closure rates may be? The failure rate may also have a ripple effect, with companies suffering with an increase of accounts receivable going up.
Yeah, my hope is that it's much too early to be able to tell on this one. I think that is a concern. There's no question about that. I think when we polled the business community as a whole before any of the programs rolled out, about 30% of businesses didn't know if they were going to be able to weather the storm on this without any kind of financial support. So, my hope is that we can do as much as possible to limit the impact this is going to have, which is why it's important in my mind that the programs that the various levels of government are putting in place are done quickly, so that it can help those businesses before they have to make that decision. And also that, a number of these programs as well, my concern is that even on a lot of the deferrals, and this is going to be important as well, it's one thing to defer, whether it be hydro rates or taxes for 3 months, but in 3 months' time, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a huge increase in revenues to be able to pay all those bills. So we're going to have to look at things in terms of what that deferral payment schedule looks like as well. I know, for instance, what some of the banks have been doing, and some have been doing specifically in regards to your mortgage, is simply adding on to the end. If you get a deferral of 2 or 3 months, rather than trying to make it up in month 4 for those 3 months that you've deferred, they're simply adding it on to the end of your lease or your rent. So, I think that's important. And the hope would be that we're not going to see as many businesses close as we think. There's no question, though. There's going to be some that are going to be more significantly impacted. Those businesses in hospitality, in tourism, certain retail are going to be impacted. The sector I'm most concerned of is the tourism sector. There's no question. We're hearing already, whether it's fishing lodges in Manitoba, people just canceling the year. Well, that can have a significant impact on a business that is seasonal like that. The impact this could have on potentially communities like Churchill that are almost 100% reliant on tourism. If there's not a tourism industry in these communities, that's going to have a significant impact. So, that's the bigger concern, and that's where we're going to be asking government as well, that looking for sector-specific support as a result of this. Even when we do look at recovery, there are going to be certain sectors that are impacted more than others, and we're going to have to be able to reply to them and provide them with some support that they're going to need.
We have another question here. As the province program comes out and gaps are noted, do you think that they will adapt their programs, or is this a take it or leave it program?
Yeah, my hope is that they'll adapt it. And I think that what we're seeing at the various levels of government is taking the approach that let's not worry about getting it perfect. Let's just worry about getting it good. And as we identify that there are gaps in programs, let's make some adjustments. I think when you develop programs that are going to be too rigid in terms of how they're delivered, in terms of what they're looking to get out of them, you're not going to get the results that you want. So unless these programs are going to be adaptable and be flexible enough to address what the needs of the business community are, the programs aren't, cannot be helpful. So, that would be the advice that we would be providing them as we continue to get more information, as all these programs are rolled out and people start applying on them. That's where we're going to find out where those gaps are. So, for instance, Cathy, you mentioned early on in regards to smaller business and one-person operations, that being a gap. We need to figure out how we fill that gap, and is the provincial program that's been established, is that going to help? And again, and I've heard this question already, is $6,000 enough? For many, it's not going to be for them to continue to operate.
Okay. Well, I think so. When we had asked this poll question, from your perspective, how many will measure recovery? The number one was when my revenue returns to normal, was our number one answer, and we've kind of got a 4 to 6 month or tied with a longer. So that's where that one. So we're not really sure again. So, but that's great. With that, I think we're just coming up to the 3 o'clock. I want to thank you, Chuck, very much for spending some time with us, and maybe we'll have you back with us again here before too long. I do want to mention that you and the Manitoba Chamber have put together a webinar series as well to try to get more information out. So any of our members are, of course, are welcome to join into those webinars and get some information. I know we had one yesterday with BDC, EDC, which was great. Love to see that stuff. And
and we'll actually have one with the Canadian Chamber with Parent BD next Thursday as well.
Great.
So
I encourage anyone that's here to look at and check those out. So once again, Chuck, love to thank you again for coming and spending the time with us. We really, really appreciate that and appreciate your support. And I guess we'll leave it at that. So
thanks, Cathy, and thanks to everyone in the chamber, and keep up the great work.
Okay, thanks, Chuck.